I'm Cristóbal. I'm an assistant professor in the College of Computer and Information Science at Cornell, so I would define myself only as a half economist, and the other half of me is an engineer. So the work I'm going to be talking today, I'm actually going to be showing you results of two studies, one that was the one that was funded, and one that is a spin-off that we have started working on, and I wanted to share to see your reaction and get your opinions to the first results we're getting. So this is joint work with a couple PhD students, Fengyan Lin from Cornell and Sijin Ding from Carnegie Mellon, and my colleagues Li Yang from George Washington, Florian Shao from the University of Michigan, and Alessandro Questi from Carnegie Mellon. So,
who is with us virtually today. He had intended to be in person, but a health issue is preventing him from attending. With his apologies.
So, what I'm going to be showing is two field experiments that look at that focus on how the presence of or the absence of online advertising is going to affect consumers' online browsing and purchasing behavior. So, in the first experiment, what we're going to do is that we're going to shield people from receiving advertising, and then we're going to see how this change of going from receiving advertising to not receiving advertising is going to affect how they behave online. And in the second experiment, what we want to do is to understand a little bit more why people use ad blocking technologies, like why people shield themselves from behavioral advertising in general and behavioral targeted advertising in particular. And the way we're going to do this is that we're going to study their willingness to accept to install an ad blocker if they're not currently using one, or to uninstall an ad blocker if they are currently using one. And then we're going to see like how sticky their preferences are and how their attitudes towards online advertising change when you change them from the condition they were using. I mean, if you take an ad blocker user and you force them to not use the ad blocker for a certain time, how their opinions about online advertising are going to change, and same thing from the people that are not currently using ad blockers. Like you make them use ad blockers for some time and then see how their opinion about advertising changes. So before going to the details, I wanted to spend a couple minutes explaining why the focus that we're using and some facts that many of the things Maso mentioned yesterday, but I wanted to mention them anyway. So the first thing to mention is that online advertising has been growing so much and is capturing so much of total advertising. I mean, when I started working on this space like 5 years ago, I would say, oh, online advertising is the second most important advertising channel. Then it was the most important advertising channel. Then it's capturing almost half of total spending. Nowadays, it's like capturing so much of total spending. I mean, this is a report from the Internet Advertising Bureau and PwC of ad spending in the US. Last year, it was about $175 billion. And it's definitely more than half. And it's been growing at a tremendous rate for the last 10 years or so. Now, how this online advertising is spread is also really interesting, because almost all of this advertising is done through programmatic ad delivery. So this is of all advertising that is not search advertising. Search advertising is their own group on its own. You could say like 90% it's programmatic advertising, and about 10% is non-programmatic placement. So, bottom line, almost all advertising spending, well, not almost all, more than half of all advertising spending in the US is through online advertising. About 40% of this online advertising goes to search advertising. About 50% of that goes to programmatic advertising. So almost all of this advertising is being delivered by automated systems. So search advertising, how does it work? I use Bing this time, not to pick up on Google all the time. So you search for something, like the branded model of a pickup truck. I live in upstate New York, and this is the vehicle of choice of my neighbors. So I went and searched for this specific pickup truck, hit enter, and results come out. the first thing you notice is that almost all of the page is taken by these ad search results, these sponsored search results. The second thing that you notice is that the first result in the page is the product of the competition. It's not the Chevrolet Silverado, it's the Ford F-150, which is the product of the competition. And it's not only the product of the competition, like Ford created a page especially for this purpose, in that if you see in the URL says F-150 versus Chevy Silverado. So this is a very purposeful strategy to get people that are searching for the product of the competition to show them the first thing they see when they search for something, their page comparing themselves to the competition. So if you don't advertise and bid high, then your competitor is going to show up in the first search result. You may think like how prevalent this is. I mean, is this a fluke that I found and used to? The only study that I have seen is this one from Zueral 2017. They get information on keywords used in advertising in China in the clothing industry. Then they analyze all the ad impressions that were done on keyword advertising, and they classify the words on generic words. Focal brand is when you're advertising your own name, and competing brand when you're advertising the name of the competition. And you can see that it's about roughly a third, and a third. So brands nowadays have to spend a lot of money doing keyword advertising on their own brands to prevent the competition from clicking on these things, or getting the clicks on these search ads. Another thing that I find is interesting is that the click rate when you advertise your own brand is huge. So there is this tendency of people to, I don't know, I do this all the time. I want to go to a page, I don't remember exactly the URL, or I'm too lazy to type the full URL, so I just search for it, click on the first thing that comes out. But that is not costless, because someone is paying to advertise in that position, and when I click that, they have to pay, I don't know, 50 cents or $1 because I did that specific action. Okay, so, and as I said, this is about 40% of all advertising spending on the internet. And then the other half, roughly, goes to programmatic advertising. How this works is that when content producers want to monetize their content, they connect to some ad technology firms. Could be one, can be many. And whenever there is an impression that they have to sell, so they have visitor, there is like this space in the web page, or in the video where they can show an ad. They tell these ad tech firms, I have this viewer. Then the ad tech ecosystem is going to run an auction in which advertisers are going to compete to show their ad to this person. They may receive some characteristics of the visitors, and based on that, they decide how much they're bidding, and then the impression is allocated to the highest bidder. Typically, advertisers are going to bid higher when they have more information about users, and users are going to see the ads of the people that were willing to pay the most to show them an ad. So this ecosystem has created sort of a tension between the merchants and the users. And if you see what the literature and what has been said in the media, there are like two views of what's going on. From one side, you have the advertising industry view, which portrays advertising in a very positive light, and they're probably right in some things. So advertising this way is good because it helps users find the things that they like. They help them discover products that they may be interested on. It's good because it promotes competition. If there's more people competing, maybe prices are going to go down, maybe quality is going to go up. It creates a very competitive environment. It's going to reduce search time. I don't have to spend that much time looking for the stuff that I want to buy if the advertisers are actively trying to find people interested. So they're actively trying to show the products to the people that are interested in them. And very importantly, this ecosystem is supporting some technologies that we all use and love, despite being very privacy conscious. We value like all that this ecosystem has created. From the user's perspective, it's very clear that people don't like tracking. I mean, if you look at all the surveys that have been done, all the legislation that's being discussed, one of the key issues today is all this surveillance ecosystem. I mean, people really don't like it. If you start thinking on the consequences of this ecosystem and this way of targeting products, you can use it in ways in which you could reduce decision-making autonomy. It can be exploitative, like, for example, think in the case that you can identify people that are very likely to spend a lot of money on gambling. And then advertisers could prey on them and like show them like gambling ads all the time, or people that have troubles dealing with addictions. It creates so much opportunity for bad actors to exploit all those things. We have all experienced some sites where there is too much advertising. When you see too much advertising, your browser becomes very slow, it becomes very annoying, it's hard to see the content that you're interested on. And what's been happening is that a lot of people are installing ad blocking softwares. The estimates, I could probably use one of these things. The estimates that I have seen, there are many estimates of how much of the internet populations are using ad blockers. The low end says like about 30%, the high end says about 60%. Just to put some name, let's say that about 40%, about half of the internet, are currently using some sort of ad blocking technology. In my class at Cornell, I always ask students how many of them are using ad blockers, and it's huge. I mean, it's like 2/3 of them are actively using one of the things.
Mobile and desktop, or is this
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm going to say a bit more about that towards the end. There is more desktop than mobile, and that's an interesting question on itself of why there's more on desktop than mobile, even though people spend a lot more time nowadays on their mobile devices than on their desktop. Okay, so having all this in mind, we wanted to do a few studies in which we study on an advertising graph, but from the consumer perspective. I mean, there's a lot of research that has been done from the merchant's perspective, like how effective this is. Are you really getting more conversion? Is this targeting efficient? What is the cost? Etc. From the publisher perspective, Karen was just showing, for example, how is the revenue that you can obtain from these things changing in function of how much data you can use, and how this is going to support the provision of free online content. But there is not that much done from the consumer's perspective. I mean, how is this really affecting consumers? I think part of the problem is because it's hard to get data. And we're focusing on two questions. One is, does shielding users from advertising influence their browsing behavior? Like, for example, if I expose people to advertising, what's going to happen with their overall spending? I mean, are they going to spend more money because they get ads? Are they going to spend less money because they install an ad blocker and suddenly they're not getting so many ads on the internet? Who are they going to buy their products from? I mean, maybe when they got advertising, they buy from a variety of people that are advertising to them. Maybe when they don't get advertising, they only buy from the stores that they know from before. What's going to happen to search time? I mean, this has been one of the big claims from the advertising industry, that it reduces search time and it helps sellers to reach audiences. If I remove advertising, what's going to happen with the time spent by consumers looking for stuff? And we really want to get to questions about how this affects consumers' welfare, which is like really difficult to address. And we can, to some extent, look at things like satisfaction. I mean, we can ask people how satisfied they are with their online experiences, like how they experience the internet, and then with the things that they buy online. And the little spin-off that I mentioned, when we started this project, there wasn't that many users. It wasn't 60% of the internet, it was like 20% of the internet. Now it's much higher. So we want to understand why users adopt these ad blockers, and how determine how sticky this preference to use ad blockers really are. Okay, so as I said, I think there's not that much done in this space because getting data is tremendously difficult. using observational data to do anything on consumers and ad blocking and advertising is pointless because of all the self-selection issues. The people that use ad blockers are very different from the people that don't use ad blockers. Ad that deliver on consumers' preferences, you can do whatever matching technique, different if you can try, is not going to be good enough. That's why we are trying to do this field experiment. So what we do is that we recruit a large number of participants. So, I mean, and I say large number of participants, not large in the scale of Google, large in the scale of an academic study with limited funds. So we try to recruit hundreds, 1,000 participants to be on this experiment for a long period of time. So we're also trying to move away from a lab experiment setting in which we ask people in a specific time for, I don't know, half an hour to focus their attention and do something. We really want to observe them on their daily lives, on their devices as they use them normally, not in a synthetic setting. So we recruit a large number of participants. We install software that we have to develop in the computers that's going to both exert the experimental condition and then collect rich information of what they're doing. The advantages of this setting is that the self-selection concerns are minimized. We are randomly assigning the experimental condition people get, and these things are going to happen over a long period of time. It's not something on a lab that happens once while people are in a very specific setting. Yeah.
Maybe this is a foolish question, especially among people who are not like using ad blocking. Do we know how many of them know they're being tracked? I ask that in the following sense. Like I maybe other people in the room also use some kind of, I guess I'd call this black hat data, but I use this a data source called SafeGraph, which is, and it's basically they're tracking people's cell phone, and most people don't have any clue that the app that they've installed is tracking them around, I think. But anyway, like, do most people know they're being tracked among the people who are not?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I have to guess the awareness is not as high as you would imagine. We do ask people in the intake survey a bunch of questions about how much they know, what they think about this. Incidentally, like in the class that I teach, it's a privacy class, so I talk about all this stuff. And I try to get a lot of what students think about privacy, because it's a different generation that was experienced to slightly different things than at least what I was exposed to, and even them are not fully aware. So I remember in one of the first classes I asked them to go to like the Google profile page that tells you what Google knows about them, and I would say 50–60% are really impressed that Google knows precisely their age, their gender group, the things they like, where they live, where they used to live. And after they see that, like most of them like turn personalization off. And that is like a very self-selected people within like a university that are interested in privacy. Like if you think in the general population, it's going to be quite different, and I would expect awareness to be lower. We're measuring that in the beginning, and that is also part of the motivation of the little spin-off that I'm going to show at the end. Thanks.
Are people conscious about the treatment and control? Do they know where they are in?
I mean, they don't know, but obviously they know. Okay. They're going to see, I mean, we had the discussion, I mean, should we shield this, should we try to hide the condition? And I mean, we don't tell them you're in the treatment condition, or we don't tell them you're in the control condition, but it's obvious that if they keep getting advertising, they're in the control condition, or in the anti-tracking. I'm going to explain a little bit more of that in a second. Okay, so so the first study. This one is where we want to study how shielding consumers from advertising and from all this way of doing advertising is going to affect them. We're going to recruit people that are not currently using an ad blocker. So this is the first condition to participate in this. You cannot be using an ad blocker.
So is that some kind of selection already?
Yeah, that is some kind of selection, and we discussed we can do the flip side. Like recruit both people that are using ad blockers and not using ad blockers, and then randomize and convince some people that are not, so that are currently using an ad blocker to uninstall their ad blocker for 3 months. There are a couple issues with that. One is that I don't think it's feasible to convince someone that's been using an ad blocker for a very long time to not use an ad blocker for a very long time. And even if there is a self-selection problem here, the cool things about field experiments is that you are really comparing across conditions. So yes, there is some self-selection, but we're really getting identification from the difference between the groups. So yeah, we start with some sample that's selected in some way, but then we're applying a treatment and we are going to estimate the effect of that treatment. I agree, it's going to apply to that group, but it's still a very large group of the population. I mean, it's still half of the population. Okay, so the participant installed software that we designed for this experiment. The software randomly assigns participants into 3 conditions. The control condition are going to keep getting advertising as they were getting advertising before. So we don't do anything besides adding a lot of instrumentation to record what they're doing online. The ad blocking condition, we're going to install an ad blocker along with our software. And in the anti-tracking condition, we only block tracking. So we opt them out from like this privacy choices system that exists, and we block tracking requests that are going out of their computers. So we use sort of the ad blocking software, but we only keep the functionality that blocks the tracking. So they keep getting ads, but these ads are not going to be targeted or are not going to be targeted to the same extent than the control condition. And then besides implementing the experimental condition, it records data for 3 months. So the software is based on a Chrome extension and a Thunderbird extension that are installed in participants' personal computers. So we have our participants. We only recruit people that use Chrome or Chrome-derived browsers that work with our software. So the Chrome extension is going to collect all the pages visited and the search conducted by our participants. So all the URLs that they use, we save them. All the search that they do on the known browsers, we save the search term and then the results page. We also know how much time they spend on each of these pages. We know what they click. Then for some pages, for the pages that we classify as shopping related, like Amazon.com or Target or whatever is a merchant that is selling something, we collect the full content of the page. So we can collect all the HTML of the page and save it.
So, if one of the goals of this is to look at privacy, and then you're collecting all this, and they know they're being monitored in this way?
Yes, no, I mean, that's the next slide. So
Okay, sorry.
I'm not lost in the diagram. And then we also report data about advertising that's shown to them, or in the when we're hiding the ads, advertising that would have been shown to them, and the clicks on the ad. And we're doing this not only the shopping pages, we're doing this on each and every page that they visit. Then the Thunderbird extension, we make people install Thunderbird, but it runs invisibly on the background, so they don't see Thunderbird. Like most people don't use an email client anymore. We install this email client, and then we hide it, so they don't see this thing collecting data. And this is collecting their emails, but only the promotional related emails and the purchase confirmations that they're getting. So we're not interested on the personal emails. We only collect things related to purchases and things connected to advertising. Nowadays, people spend also a lot of time on their mobile devices. We cannot collect data on mobile devices, but we require participants to install software in the mobile devices that's going to mimic the experimental condition they are. So if they're in the ad blocking condition, we ask them to install ad blocking software in their mobile device, and we have ways of verifying that they did that and they're actually complying with that. Besides all this, also participants are completing periodic surveys. So, and we're also asking them about satisfaction with the purchases and their browsing experience. We have very strict privacy safeguards on this.
Sorry, you see all the emails in principle that is.
No, I mean, we don't see it. So, okay. I do not want to spend more time on
Oh, okay,
on
it's
that,
fine.
but it's a client-server infrastructure in which the software is in the client and it's taking out a lot of information. So we don't see the emails. Our software sees the emails, then scans them, pulls out the ones that are shopping related, strips personal information, so deletes names, addresses, phone numbers, credit card numbers, everything that would be personal, and sends to us whatever is left. And then, before sending it, the information is chopped, so it's not sent as, then it's encrypted, and it's sending pieces. When it reaches the server, it's de-encrypted, merged together, and stored.
Very impressive.
Okay, so we did not start from scratch. This is based on a project that already did something similar at CMU that was called the Security Behavior Observatory. So we were not the first one to do something this invasive. This project was already done and it worked and didn't have any issues. The participants know what we're doing. Our consent form explains everything. It's very long. So at the end, we sort of test them on whether they understood what they're doing. Because most people like scroll through the consent form, click on next, and was done with it. And then we realized when we did the pilot was that they didn't really read it. And then when they realized what we were doing, they would drop out. So now we actually ask them, do you consent? And then do you ask them, like, do you agree that we're doing this with your data? Do you agree that we're doing this? So we're very careful that they know, and they really know what we're doing.
Sorry, but the recruitment works how? So basically, it's a person surfing, and then a pop-up shows up, and you tell them, hey, would you be interested in participating in a study where we track you? And is it online recruitment?
No, now we're recruiting people from Mechanical Turk, similar platforms.
Okay.
We want to recruit some participants from the wild using advertising. The wording would have to be chosen carefully to be truthful and be able to recruit people.
Yeah, no, because I mean, imagine like if it's like persons that basically you recruit them with a pop-up or something, then I would be concerned that this is a very selected group of individuals that is like basically willing.
Yeah, I mean, willing to be tracked. No, I mean, yeah, no, we have discussed those issues and
okay.
We're trying to recruit people that are not affected to that. So other options that we have discussed. So one is through advertising, but not being so specifically. Like other studies that have done things similar use Facebook advertising that seems to be quite effective for these purposes. We can recruit people from the social studies panels from different universities. I mean, we have researchers from CMU, Cornell, Michigan, George Washington. All these universities have pools of participants. We can recruit people from them, from those pools. And all the tests we have done so far have been with MTurk users. Okay, as I claim, data is encrypted, personal information is stripped at the participant's computer. We try to be very careful about the things. And okay, so I cannot understate how difficult it has been to develop this thing. I'm not going to say how many years we have been working on this. We're very grateful for the funding that has allowed us to continue this project and see it through this stage where we are finally ready to start recruiting our full sample. We're verifying the latest version of the software, and once we're sure it works, we're going to begin recruiting the 1,200 samples. I mean, we're trying to be very careful because we have to pay participants a lot of money, and 1,000 participants times a lot of money is a lot of money. We need to get this right when we do it. The data that we will collect is going to allow us to explore several research questions. And we like it because we think that it's going to be very causal on revealing the relationship between ad blocking and tracking. And now I'm going to show you the questions, I'm going to show you some data, but with the disclaimer that please, this data is based on a very small sample of a not very carefully selected sample. This is just testing of the software. So it's more to show you this is the type of data that we would use to answer the questions. Don't infer anything from what comes in the TAs.
It seems like there's probably another paper, which is the recruitment process. Like knowing, like getting a sense of how many people are opting out and their price and everything. That seems like a paper right there.
That is
like if you explain to them what tracking is, and then you find out what their willingness to accept or whatever, however this works. That actually seems pretty interesting to me. So
that
I
is
was, don't throw your data out.
almost exactly what I'm going to show next.
Okay, sorry, yeah.
Okay, so for example, type of question that we want to explore. So, do consumers spend more or less time searching for product information across the different experimental conditions? So, the informative view of advertising says that advertising is great because it's going to help consumers find things that they like and help merchants communicate their products to potential customers. Behavioral tracking and other advertising should be very effective in helping consumers find the product that they like. And if all this is true, we should observe that users in our ad blocking condition and anti-tracking condition are going to spend more time searching for stuff. And they're going to spend more time in shopping pages before they complete an actual purchase. How can we do this? As I said, we record all the URLs visited by participants. We have a classifier that tells us if the URL was a search page, if it was a shopping page, or it was something else. We can classify each of the URLs and then look how much time they spent on shopping versus non-shopping sites. And then make comparisons across code. As I said, disclaimer, these figures are just meaningless. They can only show you like rough estimates. So at least in the experiment we have done, about half of the browsing that people do is related to shopping. These are, as I said, people recruited from Mechanical Turk, so we're throwing out all like Qualtrics-centric pages, all the things that they would do like for work. We're here considering only non-work related pages and shopping. Okay, so another question that I think it's a lot more interesting is to look if people in the control condition or the experimental condition are more or less satisfied with the stuff that they buy online. If advertising works in the intended way, then the things that I buy when I see advertising should leave me with more consumer surplus rather than with less consumer surplus. However, maybe real-time bidding that is always allocating ad to the highest bidder is going to lead to a scenario in which the winners of the auctions are not the ones that are going to leave me with the highest consumer surplus, are going to be the ones that are more effective at extracting consumer surplus from me.
That's a pretty big conjecture, right?
It's a huge conjecture, yes. I agree. So we can detect purchases in two ways. As I said, we collect all the HTML on shopping pages and we can analyze what people bought. And then a growing concern is that a lot of people buy stuff from their mobile phones and we are not recording data on mobile phones. However, most shopping sites send you an email after you buy something with a purchase confirmation, and we're looking at the email. So we can detect purchases from HTML page collection and through email purchases. Knowing what people buy, we can ask them about their purchase satisfaction, like sometime after the purchase. So this is actual data from the different trials we have done. So we can see, like for example, that someone bought like some hand soap on Amazon, it was in that blocking condition, paid $6.48. Sometimes we run into things that make us question if we should break our IRB commitment, like this person that bought 2 boxes of ammunition, like 500 rounds of ammunition, and spent $1,000. Then we started looking at what other things they were doing. Then they went and rented a cargo trailer. And then
Very large trash bags.
that's the point where we started getting pretty concerned about it.
Yeah.
But then fortunately they go and buy a book about hunting, butchering, and cooking wild game. So it was just some hunting enthusiasts buying supplies for their next trip. So we get all this data, and then in the periodic surveys that we do, we can ask people about specific purchases. So we can ask, for example, how satisfied or dissatisfied are you with product X that you buy? And we can repeat these questions also at like different points in time. So we have surveys every month and we have a survey at the end. So we can ask them like close to the purchase decision, we can ask them like 3 months after. We can ask them, for example, how satisfied they are with the price that they bought for this. And more interestingly, we can start like back tracing the information and see, for example, if the purchase was done because they click on an ad, or the purchase was done because they click on a sponsored search result, and see if the satisfaction and dissatisfaction with price and dissatisfaction over time changes depending on these things. Another question that I find like really interesting is about market concentration. Like when you expose people to advertising, are they going to buy from more or from fewer merchants? So the rationale behind this is that online advertising is a very effective way for merchants to get themselves known. The internet is a very big place. If I have a small specialty shop in Ithaca, it's going to be very difficult for internet users to know me. The only way I have to make myself known is by using advertising. Incidentally, one of my neighbors does precisely that. And before he started using like advertising and learning about this stuff, he was getting no sales, and now he is like doing pretty well with his business. So this is something that people actually use and it has positive effects. So it's hard to determine what's going to happen if we do advertising, because from one side there is the argument I just said, oh, maybe this is the way small merchants have to make themselves known on the internet. But then you also have real-time bidding and have ad impressions being allocated to the highest bidder. So maybe this concentrates most of the ad impressions of the people that is on the merchants that are able to pay more. So an interesting question that I'm not sure which way it will go is, when we shield people from advertising, do they expand the range of shops they buy from, or does it constrain? Do they buy from fewer stores? So in the different tests we have done, we have observed 78 purchases. 53 of these purchases have been from Amazon. So 70% of all the purchases we have observed so far are Amazon purchases. So when we shield people from advertising, what's going to happen with this Amazon dominance? Is it going to increase or is it going to decrease? The other thing that's interesting is that there's really nobody that's second to Amazon. I mean, the second store that we observe more purchases from is Walmart. There's only 2 people that bought stuff from Walmart. There were like 8 purchases completed on Walmart, and then 17 other different stores that only 1 people buy from them. Okay, this one is also really cool. So we can get all the ads that people receive. And then we realize that we can also get all the links that were embedded on the ad. And one of the links is the little button that sometimes you find on the top right corner of an ad that you can click to see why you were shown an ad. So at this experiment, I disabled my ad blocker, went to a page, I was shown this, I don't know why. Then I click on the why this ad, and they tell me, oh, we show you this ad because of your similarity to groups of people the advertiser is trying to reach according to your activity on this device. So we have all these why these ads links recorded, and we realized that we can visit them later. So we did that with the tests that we have done, and we can see why people in the different conditions were shown the ads that they were shown. So for example, in the control condition, most of the ads that are being shown is because of retargeting. So like a third of the ads were shown because you have visited the page of the advertiser or have used the app of the advertiser. The second column is and third columns are just sanity checks that our experimental conditions actually work. It goes down a lot in the anti-tracking condition, and there's almost no ads on the uploading condition, so it's all zeros. Then the second most common reason is the time of day or your general location, then how Google estimates what your interests are, then contextual targeting, like the web page where the ad was being shown, the age group, similarity with groups of people the advertiser is trying to reach, etc. So we can get like this type of data, and then we can actually see how people react to this type of targeting from the user side of things. So I show you some questions, many other questions that we can use this data to address. Got
A
it.
couple questions. So the last slide, why is there 8% of people that are ad blocking that are targeted based on advertisers visit our app?
Because it's not perfect. I mean, the anti-tracking measures are just not that effective. So what we're hoping is to get as much anti-tracking as possible. So let me go back a little bit. So this is the anti-tracking condition. These people are getting advertising. It shouldn't be targeted advertising. And to do that, we opt them out of tracking, and then we block requests. But we're never going to do perfect. So I guess that 8% reflects the times the anti-tracking doesn't work. This is still a lot less than the other.
Okay. And I guess,
No, sorry, go ahead.
so you did one observational study that looked at the effect of ad blockers on consumer online spending, finds a reduction of 1.45%. So I mean, ad effect sizes are exceedingly small, even I guess, in aggregate for this person looking at consumers over time. So I mean, have you done power calculations? Do you think that you can actually detect these small effect sizes given experiments of like 1,000 people?
That's a great question. We're yet to see what's going to happen. I would expect that for some things, no. But on the flip side, when you do the analysis, so we're doing all the data collection from the consumer side. So we know these are real consumers. We know this is real behavior. No bots involved. No. So in the observational studies where you use the data that is collected from the ad tech side of things.
This is probably a consumer panel, right? This is the Vilma Todry paper.
I have not seen. Oh, I've seen.
Science Frontiers paper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a big unknown. We will see what happens.
I mean,
For the smaller effects, yeah, I mean, I agree. There is a
right?
huge
Like, I don't
risk.
want this to end up in tears. You're spending, thousands of dollars, and this is really cool, but you don't have the power to detect things.
No, we expect that we're not going to have power to detect some things, but there are others that I'm fairly confident, and we have done the analysis that we're going to have power to detect. And yeah, I mean, okay, no, sorry.
Yeah, no, it was just a remark. So when you're talking about anti-tracking, it's essentially cookie-based tracking, I assume, right?
No, we're also blocking requests. So yeah, I mean, we use cookies to opt people out, but we also block requests from like non-trackers.
Just because this might maybe explain, so at least, on my Mac, sometimes, apparently I'm not tracked, so that's what they promised me, but on the other hand, Safari, you can opt in to allow Safari to share your location and things like this. So this might perhaps explain some of the responses that we just saw on the previous slide, right?
Yeah. And I think anti-tracking is not perfect. I mean, I have, in my personal computer, I have anti-trackers, I have request blockers, I have script blockers, and whatever product I search online shows up on my wife's Facebook. So, I mean, these things are not perfect. We have some confidence that we do observe like some reductions. They're never going to be perfect, that we know. Like I said, there's other questions that we can address. For example, aggregate spending, how people are going to be, like more behavioral questions on how satisfied are people going to be with their online browsing experience, like how people are going to react to websites that ad blocking users.
So do you allow them to turn it off temporarily or no?
Yes, so they can, we record that, so they can whitelist sites. So I don't know, if they read the Washington Post and the Washington Post blocks people that use ad blockers, we don't want them to install the software, we want them to just whitelist the... Okay, so yes, brief recap, we have developed this infrastructure that allows us to implement experimental conditions and collect a lot of information on a secure and not invasive way. I show you some questions that we plan to address, but the infrastructure can be used to investigate a number of issues. This does not, so our focus is, all the focus of what I have mentioned is very consumer-based. The question need not to be consumer-based. The data data collected from the user side can help address questions that typical advertising effectiveness studies cannot address. So if you have any idea of how to use our platform, feel free to reach out to us after years of developing this. We are very much interested on using it as much as possible. So myself, Alessandro, will be very happy if you have ideas on how to use this. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, this sounds really cool. I worry a bit about, going back to your list of questions, I do worry about demand effects in this setting. I think one thing that I'd be really interested to see is just, you're gonna be tracking the ads that people are seeing, and I think it would be interesting to study how that varies by tracking versus not. I don't think that's been systematically done. I think there's some people have this mental model that, you just go to like contextual targeting and you see all these great ads, but I think if you look in the past, and if you turn off tracking on your browser, like I see like a bunch of earwax removal ads and like credit score ads. So, like YouTube or Google has done non-public research on consumer responses to these ads, and they've kind of said, these ads are very good and people don't really like them. It'd be interesting to see that quantified.
Yeah, that's a great thought. We have not thought of it. How ineffective advertising can be when you turn off tracking. I hope we'll react to that. Sorry. So I was still thinking on your question about Tori's paper on the power. One thing that I didn't mention is that we also have more outcomes than what you can get. So we know if people click on the ad. So maybe in the conversion rate is going to be like very low and it's very hard to measure. But maybe the click rate or the other measures, we could have more power that people have not been able to measure before because they don't have as much data. So
that cuts both ways, right? Though if you have 100 outcomes to look at, you need to adjust your p-value so that you're not just saying that 5 of them are statistically significant, right?
Yeah, we definitely have a lot less observation than what Google would have, but hopefully we have a lot more data than people usually get. Chris?
I may have been misremembering, but in earlier, one of your very first slides, setting up the problem, you suggested that one of the things you wanted to measure was consumer welfare. And I didn't see the development of that in the later slides.
Right, so depends on how you interpret welfare. If I interpret welfare from a strictly economic perspective and say consumer welfare is consumer surplus, yes, I agree, we don't have a perfect proxy because we don't know people's willingness to pay, we don't know. However, by asking people about purchase satisfaction, about their opinion about prices, we're hoping to indirectly measure welfare through those variables.
Well, I'm not an economist, but the big question, the most natural, simple answer to infer welfare is quantity, is to look at the total transactions and purchase behavior to see that. And if I pick one measure that you probably do have access to, it's that.
Right. Yeah, quantities and price. I was thinking it would be ideal that, for example, observe if people in the treatment condition, the control condition for similar products end up paying different prices. Like when you are on, do you pay? But then we're going to run into Garrett's problem of there's no way we get enough power with 1,000 observations to get people to buy similar stuff in both conditions that we can compare and get significant results. That's why we're sort of relying on this. Yeah, quantities, aggregate spending can be another way.
I'm just thinking about the selection issue that we talked about before, and it may actually be a good thing that it's a selected group in the sense that it may be the policy relevant group in the sense that if you're thinking about policy that protect more privacy, the type of people that it's going to affect is going to be the type of people that you test with, right? You've done the experiment with, rather than those who already had the ad blocker and all this stuff, because they're not going to be benefit as much, I would say. I don't know what the word for that.
Yeah,
In that sense,
true. It's a group that is exposed to this thing. The other group already made their decision. Yeah, and Yeah, I mean, and we did consider for a time, and we were planning for a time to recruit also ad blocker users. We decided for two ways. One, for two reasons. One, the one I already mentioned, you cannot convince them not to use an ad blocker. And the second one is that we're going to dilute our power even more, and we don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's maybe a strange comment, but starting to think about it. So if you want to investigate impact on browsing behavior, there's like, there's a sort of mechanical part going on here, right? Because if you, in some sort, so do people that are not tracked receive fewer advertising links?
Yes.
Yes, so then, you can already not click on this link, so, naturally you might not end up on Amazon. So it's just like, did you think about how you can disentangle, let's say, a direct mechanical effect from an implied behavioral effect? Is this...
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated relationship because also if there are fewer ads, maybe the likelihood of you to click on the ad is mechanically increases just because,
Yes, no, yeah, I have no answer.
Yeah, I mean,
I find it interesting if you had already.
Yeah, I mean, we can look at ad density, we can look at different things and try to control for them. As I said, I think most of our identification comes in differences across groups. I don't think we can be that detailed on saying, oh, it's because there were X fewer ads. Or it's more of when you show people targeted ads versus non-targeted ads, they click more on advertising or less on advertising than.
Is there a before and after period in your experimental design?
No, so it's no. We also consider that and also rule it out because we could have a before after a couple of weeks, but then with 2 weeks of data, what can we do about it? We side with the side of just implementing the conditions from the beginning, 3 groups that hopefully are going to be big enough. Yep.
Really quick question. Have you done a pre-analysis plan for this work?
We have not submitted it yet. We're trying to be very careful on not reading anything into what we have done. We have paper trail of what we intended to do for a very long time. So while we have not submitted pre-register it yet, we will pre-register it before running the whole thing.
Great. Thanks.
Okay, so in 5 minutes, the little spin-off, one of the things that we became interested as we were working on this is that ad blocker adoption keeps increasing and increasing. And understanding why people use or not use ad blockers is important. In my experiments with my students, I also I have been asking people that don't use ad blockers why they don't use them. And there's some group of people that actually like advertising. I mean, my prior would be that nobody likes advertising. There's some group of people among my students at least that say, I like advertising. Advertising is good. I like the stuff they show me. Preferences may not be as obvious. What we're going to do is we want to capture willingness to accept to uninstall an ad blocker if people are already using it, or to install an ad blocker if they're not. And then we're going to want to determine if the attitudes towards online advertising changes when people usually not exposed to advertising are exposed to advertising for a period of time. So maybe you're using an ad blocker, you think you hate advertising, but then you start getting advertising and you don't hate it as much. And the other way around. So what we're going to do is, that we recruit participants from Prolific. We detect if participants are using an ad blocker or not. We do this both in their desktop and mobile devices. Then we use a VDM mechanism, assess their willingness to accept, to uninstall their ad blocker for 1 month in all their devices. For those that are not using ad blockers, same thing, to install an ad block in all their devices. And then after we assess their willingness to accept, they complete a survey regarding their attitudes towards online advertising. We ask them about their personal well-being and satisfaction with their online experiences. Then every week, we ask them to complete weekly surveys. 2 objectives. One is verify that they're still complying with the experimental condition. Second is to ask them again about their online experiences and well-being during the last week. And then at the end of the 4 weeks, they complete an exit survey that is very similar to the entry survey, so we can measure differences on their attitudes. And then we reassess their willingness to accept to continue with the ad blocker install or uninstall for a longer period of time and see, are they going to ask for more money? Are they going to ask for less money? The same as before. As we don't really trust what people tell us, then after the experiment ends, we're going to invite participants to a follow-up in which our real intent is just to reassess if the people that we asked to uninstall the ad blocker install it back again after the experiment, and the people that we asked to install the ad blocker if they uninstall it after the experiment ended. So preliminary results shows a very, very heterogeneous preferences. So this is the amount people requested to install an ad blocker. There's a lot of people that would, like 60% of people that would install an ad blocker for like a small amount of money, like $10, $20. And then you have some other people, like not that many, that would ask for very large amount, like $200, like $500. So we read that as like, I am not installing ad blocker no matter how much you pay. Then, obviously, the uninstall, so the scales on the axis are the same, so you can compare the distributions equally. You can see that this is more spread out, the preferences are stronger. You have to pay more money to people to uninstall the software, but we were quite surprised that you can still get like 20–40% of people to get rid of their ad blocker for something that is not a very large amount of money. Okay, so I think this result of like this big heterogeneity and the fact that you can get some people to switch position for a small amount of money raises interesting questions on what are the factors that can tip the decision between adopting or not adopting an ad blocker. I think this is an important issue where now the publishing industry is so concerned with half of the internet blocking their ads. Then we also want to study how much inertia there is in the use or not use of ad blockers, with this question of like following up and seeing how many reinstall or uninstall the ad blocker that we ask them to install. And more interestingly, I think, is to determine if there is a level of advertising that would make ad blocking less attractive to users. Like maybe ad blocking now is so attractive because people are really, or because people think that advertising has really go like over some acceptable threshold. So in software that we're planning to develop, we're going to ask people that instead of removing their ad blocker, they install an ad blocker of our own. And this ad blocker, instead of blocking ads, is going to like modulate the amount of advertising that people are going to get. And then by changing this level, we can see at what point of advertising people are going to get tired of our ad blocker, remove it and change it for a traditional ad blocker. So say, like, is there a level of advertising that would be acceptable, that people would be okay with getting advertising instead of just shielding themselves completely? Okay, so that is what I have. Thank you. Yes, Carl.
Maybe this is kind of connected to your last point, but like ad blocking is a bit of a misunderstood thing because like a lot of ad blockers see a lot of ads, you know, especially through IO, they have the acceptable ad program that allows a lot of ads to be sent to these people. So is that what you're kind of talking about at the end there? Like,
no, I mean the acceptable ads program, it's sort of an odd way because I think it's not really about getting some ads in between. It's a way of the ad blocker creator to monetize the ad blocker. So yeah, I mean the incentives there are not the same. No, we're thinking like, for example, is that we have an ad blocker, but that blocker triggers itself like 25% of the times. So you would see advertising in 1 out of 4 pages instead of every page. Something more like that. Yes.
So it used to be that actually you would install an ad blocker, not to block the ads, but make the pages just load much faster. Mm-hmm. So is that still an important consideration, do you think?
I think so. I mean, and that's, I think, why it's important that maybe the problem is the level of advertising, not advertising itself.
but does your machinery measure that? Like, or is that one of the things you're doing in this paper? Is
we can do that in the previous one. No, this one, we don't want to develop software that complicated again, so we're not measuring that.
Yes.
We could. I mean, no, that's a good point. I mean, we could add some instrumentation to see page loading speed besides advertising exposure.
All right. Well, please join me in thanking Cristobal for a fantastic. Well, we want to just briefly, we won't hold you very long, just to say thank you all for coming and for making this such a successful conference. So we are delighted to have the opportunity to lead this program. It is, we were talking, Rakesh and I, it's exceeded our expectations in terms of creating a home and support for this type of work. You know, just the presentations themselves and the research it's the biggest reward and the biggest sign. But the conversations we've had with people about how important and how useful this funding has been to making your research programs proceed is really important to us. And so as we've said before, we are in the third round of funding. It's open till the end of September. We are really hoping that the community, one, that you're welcome to apply again, but also to let other people in a similar situation to where you are, your colleagues, your students and all that, make them aware of the opportunity, because obviously this program will only succeed as much as the work that's submitted. We all have this dread fear that you throw a party and nobody comes, in the sense that I think we all benefit from having high quality submissions, both in terms of the work that's done and also the programs that we can do. We are delighted to have you all here this time. We are planning to do another conference like this, again with the grantees. If you would like to continue to be part of this community and are interested in attending, just even if you're not a grantee next year, please let us know. Based on the amount of response, hopefully we can accommodate everybody, but we think community building and engagement is as much a part of this as anything else. Before I forget, the last word is economics, appropriately enough. We really want to thank the Knight Foundation for supporting this, and personally thank Caroline Olson and Carlin Miller for all the work they've done in making this go so smoothly and so beautifully. So thank you both. Thoughts?
Thank you.
Well said.